Today, we're going to talk about climate change, and more specifically, global warming, people's role in this phenomenon. And for today's topic, I invited Kate Elizabeth Tierney to talk about the subject. Professor Tierney teaches at the Department of Earth and Environmental Science at the University of Iowa. Professor Tierney also develops a fundamental study on the implications of carbon isotopes when earning her graduate degree from the Ohio University. I've chosen the topic global warming. I have to be honest that I first thought about the expert I wanted to interview, and after I figured out a topic, because I really wanted to do an interview with you since I had a class with you last semester, and even if the class was like 200 people, I definitely felt like you made the difference for every single student.
Let's do it. Tell me.
So I read your study about carbon isotopes, and you opened the first chapter with global climate change is one of the greatest challenges of modern science. Can you explain me why?
Well, there are a few reasons. One is because when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about changing the entire system in which humanity has evolved and functions. We're talking about changing basically the fundamental survivability of the surface of our planet. The other reason, among the other reasons, are reasons of understanding the scope. When we're talking about changing climate, it's not a simple system. There are many levers that control different aspects of climate, changing the fundamental distribution of resources on planet Earth over millennia. It's not a simple question and answer.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, another thing that I was curious about your study is that you analyzed the Permian period. You analyzed that period because it shares a similarity with the recent times. I know your study, considering it was published in 2010, do you still think that is true?
I do. Yeah, those facts are well-established facts. It was a time where the Earth was reorganizing, right? There was rifting that was happening, but it hadn't yet gotten going so much that sea level pushed up onto the continents. We had terrestrial carbon cycle that was very similar to what it is now, or what it was before we deforested it, right? Now, the other thing is that when you look at the atmospheric levels, so carbon dioxide is relatively low, we think, based on proxies, right? Because we can't measure it directly, that atmosphere is gone. But all of the indicators, all of the proxy measurements point to carbon dioxide being low in the same way that it is today. And again, it was a time where glaciers grew and shrank in a way that like they're doing now, until it got to a point where all of a sudden world chemistry changed, global chemistry changed, driven by a variety of factors. The difference is that none of those factors were humans. The Earth is not a stagnant system, even without humans. When we look at the Permian and we say to ourselves, in what ways was it different? The most significant way is that there was no widespread use of fossil fuels, right? There were no humans disrupting the carbon cycle.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. You read my mind. Yeah. Okay, so we burn from fossil fuels. They go to the atmosphere in form of CO2. But how CO2 makes our planet warmer?
So on our planet, here's our planet. Our planet has an atmosphere. And up here is the sun. And the sun emits energy as light. That light, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
When this light comes in, it comes through our atmosphere unimpeded. This stuff up here, the higher energy stuff, is often rejected. It's reflected and it's absorbed and deflected so that it doesn't get all the way in. That's the UV filtration of the ozone layer. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
The ozone actually absorbs those higher energy frequencies. And that's why what little amount of UV gets through, that's what gives us sunburn. So this stuff, this higher energy stuff, is generally filtered by our atmosphere. Now, when the sunlight hits the earth, I want you to think about this because you've experienced it before. Imagine yourself sitting in the sun on a sunny day. Cool day, but the sun's bright, hitting your back. What do you feel?
I feel my back warm.
It warms up because that light, as it strikes your back, does an energy conversion from visible light to heat. Does that make sense to you?
Makes sense.
Okay, you've experienced it.
Yes.
That's the same thing that happens to light all over our planet. It gets transformed. It hits, some amount is reflected back to space. Now, the thing is that CO2 in our atmosphere, it reacts to the heat wavelength, right? And so as that heat is coming back out, the CO2 acts like the ozone did to the UV lights.
Oh.
It absorbs it and holds it. It says, no, you're mine now.
Instead of reflecting.
Instead of just letting it pass through unobstructed, it now absorbs that energy and vibrates, which is the heat in our atmosphere.
Okay, you looked at all this data, you made an incredible amount of data analysis, and yet today there's people that deny the existence of global warming and the environmental crisis.
It's not about science.
No,
it's not about science. It's about emotion, and those people who don't already believe will not be convinced by more data, because that's not their problem. The problem is how they feel about it and the fact that they've been made afraid because it's been put out as both something scary and something we are to blame for. Yes, it is our behavior that caused it, but we didn't really get it when we started. I mean, there are papers going back a long time that note into the 1800s that note that carbon dioxide is a gas that causes warming. We know that going back to the 1800s. Nobody ever put it together that this would warm up our planet. And it wasn't until the 90s that we really put our finger on it because it was starting to happen. It wasn't a maybe someday it could. We could start to measure it. And all of a sudden it became a reality. But then it became big oil versus the common everyday person. That's just a silly way of dealing with it. If I said to you, you are to blame for all people smoking, how could you possibly take responsibility for that? You didn't make that choice.
And how can I change it?
And you can't change it. Yeah. That's right. Particularly when our entire experience in this country right now is nothing but, nuh-uh, you did, nuh-uh, you did. This confrontational, childish bickering. Climate change has been caught up in modern politics where it doesn't really belong. It's a simple scientific question that has a simple scientific answer. How do you get elected again? How do you maintain your power to get to your goals? It's not societal long-term well-being. It's your goals. What are your goals? I'm not even blaming one party because both parties have used this as a football.
Yeah, but okay, we cannot blame one single person, but how a single person, what will be the most effective thing a single person could do to help lessen global warming, for example?
Vote.
Vote?
Yeah. Vote. That's the most important thing any of us can do. Because changing your driving habits, no, that's not going to do it. Changing your heating habits, no, that's not going to do it. We as a society need to change. If you look at the statistics of where our emissions are coming from, it's not coming from personal use. It's industrial, it's agricultural, it's electricity generation, it's societal. If I was said to you, what could you do as an individual once you voted? Eat less meat, eat less dairy. I often say that the most powerful person is a young Republican because they're the people who actually have the ability to control the position that the Republican Party takes here, which are the people who are denying, right? The Republicans are denying that this is happening. This is, and fighting back the measures that might actually help with this problem in the long term. That obstructionism is dangerous. And a well-educated young Republican might be the most influential person on this. I want to vote Republican, but you must adopt meaningful climate change policies. Writing that letter is powerful move, because our legislators, our future presidents, need to hear that being Republican does not marry them to a climate lie.
Thank you very much, Professor Tierney, for explaining more about global warming and society's role in preventing an environmental catastrophe. Elizabeth Tierney is a professor of environmental science at the University of Iowa Department of Earth and Environmental Science. She is also the author of a study on carbon isotopes' correlation with the greenhouse effect.